So again, welcome back everyone. Just for those who mightn't be here last week, my name is Tom O'Leary and with O'Leary and Associates Training and Consultancy Limited. And I work with community and voluntary organisations on project planning, project development, project financing, and also we do a lot of work around feasibility analysis and grant application for capital projects. So the second part of the project development, project planning and development workshop, this evening we're going to focus on looking at your projects that you need to develop in your villages or towns or communities, or projects that you want to develop within your organizations. So for those who were last week, we covered the initial planning process where you're trying to identify the various different needs within your organization or within your area, based on needs analysis through public consultation, identify gaps that are in your community, looking at what facilities and services are required in your organizations or in your towns and villages, looking at things like area profiling, so the population area, the age of the people in the area, levels of employment, dereliction, vacancy, things like that, to get an idea in terms of where the community is at. Then looking at stakeholder consultation, so talking to the various agencies and organizations that can support you and your projects down the line to see where their policies at and what they can support and what they can't support. And then also looking, I suppose, in terms of how your projects tie in, how your projects tie in with national policy and local policy. So in terms of Kerry, how it ties in with Kerry County Development Plan, county tourism strategies, county economic plan, and then how your projects tie in the national policy around rural developments and policies in relation to working and improving rural areas. So once you've done the analysis, once you've done the research, you analyze what the needs are in your organizations or in your community, and you identify key priorities. So that's kind of where we were looking at last week. So we're focusing on last week in terms of identifying what the problems were and how we as an organization can solve those problems. And are you best placed or suited to solve the problems of the community or of the organization. So tonight we're going to focus on the action plan in terms of, okay, if you've got a project that you have in mind and you want to start that project, what are the steps you need to take to start this? So I'm going to focus very much kind of on the larger scale projects. So basically the steps that we'll be talking about this evening kind of are the same for every project, but I'm focused on maybe some larger projects, so they're slightly more complex, and some we will be or might be developing large projects like capital projects, building projects next year or in the future. And I suppose it's important that you're aware of what's involved in that before you start that kind of, it can be very long and hazardous burden. So really the key thing tonight is looking in terms of developing that project and how you should do it. Next week we'll focus on the stage when the project is up and running and you have the project going, how do you sustain it long term, and how do you manage it long term. But tonight we're going to focus on developing the project. So the key thing that we look at with every organization we work with, whether that's a small organization or a large organization, or if it's a village or a town or a parish, you have to have a structure in place to develop the project, okay? What you don't want is one person or two people come up with an idea, thinking it's the best idea ever, and they run with that project or run that idea and they go on their own with it, they do a solo run on it, and there's no proper structure behind it to back it up. They tend not to survive long. And if they do start, they don't survive long at all, but most of them get started because you need a proper, well-structured group of people behind the project. I like to kind of use the analogy of rowing. So this is good where we have a team that are rowing in the same direction. This is not good at all where you got a solo person that's going to do their own thing and can kind of carelessly go to close to obstacles along the way. A lot of groups we work with, they tend to kind of go kind of in solo runs. Some people within the groups will go on a solo run on a project without the backing of their team or without the backing of their community, and that doesn't work because they won't get supported by the funders. What people like to see is this: they like to see people, a team, all working together, all going in the same direction, all in the same kind of aim, all working in harmony. And not putting or creating any obstacles where there's no obstacles in the first place. So it's really important to have some sort of structure in place. I'm not talking about a massive organization with loads of people, because that doesn't work either. But certainly a key number of people that are willing to put their shoulder to the wheel and to drive forward with projects and be motivated to keep going with it. So the types of structures, I suppose, that we would work with, they could be, limited companies by guarantee, so they could have a legal status, or they could be just constituted groups like a voluntary organisation or a community group with a constitution, small number of people, or they could be larger companies with staff and with employees and the volunteers. They would have a board or a committee structure, so that would be some sort of committee structure in place that would be in charge of running the place and managing the place. You would have often subcommittees that are charged with doing specific tasks within an organisation or within a community. Every organisation, regardless of its size, should be compliant in relation to health and safety planning. If they're hiring people, in terms of employment law, if they've got volunteers, they have their volunteer policies in place. And you also must make sure that they're compliant in terms of whatever policy and procedure that are relevant to them. So, for example, if they're working with young people, they've got child protection policies in place. They're working with vulnerable people, they've got vulnerable people protection policies in place. And it's important that that's done properly, because without compliance, things don't get done right, and also you won't get supported financially. You have to have good governance structure, so it has to be accountability, it has to be transparency, especially with projects that are publicly funded. You can't just go off and do what you want to do. You have to, be well governed, well structured. If you're representing the community, you have to represent that community well. If you're representing your organisation, you have to represent your organisation well. So it's very important that whatever structure you're part of, whether it be a not-for-profit group, just a constitution, or a not-for-profit company, it's important that you're well governed. And that's a given now when it comes to getting any sort of funding. Is the sound okay? And do you think the sound, you're saying the sound is muffled? Is everyone okay with the sound?
Yeah, maybe it's my computer just sounds a bit, a bit muffled for me.
Is everyone okay with the sound?
It goes in and out, Tom. It gets muffled and then it comes back clear again.
Okay. All right, I'll just see if I can, just give me 2 seconds there. I'm going to just stop the share for 1 second and see if I can sort that out. Give me 2 seconds here. Okay, is that a bit better?
Much better, yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Okay. We'll do testing 1, 2, 3 before I start this one. Okay, so the common structure, I suppose, yeah. So again, every organisation has to have some level of governance, a high level of governance, and that is a given now when it comes to getting funding from any department or any organisation. If you're registered as a charity and you're registered to charity regulator, you must make sure that you're compliant with the regulator's governance code, and that you're fully compliant in terms of the reporting structures, which is something I'll talk about next week in more detail, and we'll talk about on the night networking session as well in more detail around the pros and cons of being a charity at the moment in terms of the regulations that are involved. Every organisation, regardless of size or what it does, should have some sort of strategic plan. Does that be detailed, comprehensive, printed, well put together strategic plan? But you need to have a plan in terms of what you're actually trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. Without a strategy and without a plan, you're kind of a bit like back to that rowing example. You're kind of rudderless. You're kind of going all over the place, and you'll be kind of moving from project to project without any kind of clear thinking involved in what you are trying to do. So it's important to have some sort of plan in place. I'm not saying go off and spend an awful lot of money doing a plan. You can do your plans yourselves. A strategic plan can be 1 page of an action plan that's well thought out in terms of what you need to do, what you can do, what you should do, and what you shouldn't do. And the key thing then, and it's something we'll be focusing very much on next week, is you have to have some sort of sustainable revenue model. Now that basically means that you need to make sure that your project can be sustained. So one of the biggest challenges of every organisation in the not-for-profit sector is that you do need to make sure that you have enough money to sustain the projects long term, and that will be looking at your revenue in terms of any fees you can get for things like grants, your fundraising strategy. Do you get sponsors? Have you got a sponsorship strategy? So it's not about just kind of case of let's develop a project and it works very well for 12 months and we're all burnt out in 12 months and we kind of step back slightly from it, and then it kind of falls apart because there's no one there to actually drive on and generate revenue, keep it going. So it's very important that when you're starting anything, that you've enough diesel in the tank to keep going. A lot of organizations, they do for a while, but then they tend to kind of after maybe year 2, year 3, maybe year 4, and definitely beyond that, it gets harder and harder for groups to kind of sustain the project because they're constantly trying to fundraise, constantly trying to get out there and developing. So next week we talk about that in relation to how to sustain your projects long term. But tonight we're going to talk about getting the projects off the ground and get them started. So types of structures, as I said, that I would be working with normally would be unincorporated groups, so your towns groups, your voluntary groups in an area, maybe in a state residence association, small voluntary organizations that are starting off. Small doing projects in the community, or doing projects with specific people in the community, like maybe a youth group or something like that, or an active retired group. They wouldn't have a legal status, they wouldn't have a legal kind of structure, but they'd be structured in some way. There's some sort of rules and policies and procedures that they follow. More often than not, I'm working with companies limited by guarantee. So the company limited by guarantee without share capital is the same as a normal company, a private company. The only difference is that there's no shares. So no one actually owns the company, which basically means no one can profit from the company. So you can't sell shares in the company. There's no dividends distributed amongst the directors of the company. Any profits that are generated within the company are reinvested back into the company in terms of developing projects or held in reserve to develop future projects. A lot of organizations that start off small, when they go down the route of getting larger capital funds or larger funding, or they're kind of negotiating contracts or entering into lease agreements or things like that, or purchasing property, they tend to go from a small kind of constituted group or an incorporated group to a corporated body, which gives them some bit of protection. There's also designated activity companies, or DACs. Again, I've worked with a few. They're not very common. They're usually set up for very specific purposes. Again, they can have shareholding or they don't have shareholding. They're not very common. I think I've worked with maybe 2, 3 in the last 20 years, so not common at all. Cooperatives were very common previously. Years ago, cooperatives were kind of the main structure within the community sector. Not so much anymore. Again, it's most now CIGs, companies limited by guarantee. Basically, all this means that you've got a structure around you. So the people that are involved, which are primarily volunteers, have some sort of structure that's around them that's going to give them a bit of protection in some cases, but it gives them a bit of unity as well in terms of that they've got more than just one person or 2 people or 3 people kind of doing everything. They've got a structure, a team around them. Okay. So a company limited by guarantee, as I said, a lot of you might already be companies limited by guarantee, or you might go down the road of being a company limited by guarantee. Basically, you have members, so instead of shareholders, you have members of the company. You do have limited liability as a director of the company, so you are protected, in some way by being a member of the company or director of the company. However, if you are reckless as a director of the company, and I mean by that, if you start borrowing money that you can't repay, or if you have an issue in terms of health and safety, in terms of that someone's got injured or seriously hurt or worse in your building or on your site or in the facility that you're responsible for, and you're found to be negligent in terms of making sure the building was safe, directors are responsible. Then you can't walk away from it because you're a company. There is responsibilities there as directors. Profit distribution, there is any profits that you make, and just because you're not a for-profit company doesn't mean that you can't make a profit. Of course, you make a profit, and you would hope to make a profit, because if you don't make profits, you can't. You want to reserves, you go on reserves, you won't be able to fund projects long term, or you won't be able to meet any unexpected costs that come up, like energy costs over the last 2 years have risen greatly. A lot of groups are on reserves. they couldn't meet their bills because there wasn't enough money in the account. They're basically operating on a break-even basis. That's not sustainable, so we do focus on making profits for not-for-profit organizations. The key thing is that profit goes back into the actual company rather than to any members of the company. Governance, you will be governed by a board of directors if you're a company. That company will have a company accountant that will audit company accounts, and you will probably as well, if you are registered with the regulator, you'll also have to be reporting to the regulator. So as a company, you'll be reporting to your funders, you'll be reporting to the regulator, you'll be reporting to revenue, and you're reporting to the company registration office. So there's a bit of paperwork and bureaucracy involved. But at that level, you would have a company accountant, and we would always advise as well that on your structure, you'd have someone with some of the finance experience or financial management experience or project management experience or business experience that knows their way around accounts and finances. And that'd be very important. Okay. So sample structure, I suppose, is kind of a sample structure we would recommend for any group or organization or company. So you have your board or your board of management or your management committee, whatever you want to call it. Some groups have core funding, so they would have core funding for staff and administration staff and management. So they would have the manager in place or coordinator in place. The majority of groups I work with wouldn't have that. They would have a purely voluntary board and voluntary staff, or volunteers doing everything. And they would have no paid staff. They might have some CE or RSS scheme workers, but they wouldn't have any core funders, salary staff. So under any structure, we would recommend, depends on the group, but the standard kind of generic structure would be an executive. So executive will be the manager, if there's a manager in place, the chairperson, secretary, and treasurer, and they would sign off on finances. They would deal with any HR issues. They would deal with any kind of legal contractual issues, any governance issues. So basically, the buck stops with that committee. They're the ones that are responsible for everything. They're the ones that signs off everything. Then you would have a finance and maybe facilities committee. So again, if you were running projects like, say, if you're a gym or you're a club, and you've got teams and facilities and pitches and clubhouses and that, and a lot of money coming in through various different sources, you'd have some finance committee managing the finances. They will report back to the executive. Again, if you've a large, say, project where you're constantly fundraising, so you're kind of reliant on fundraising. So a lot of the same cancer support groups I work with don't get any new core funding. They have to raise money every year through fundraising. They would have a fundraising and marketing committee because a large part of what they do is trying to raise money to keep their services going. So it'll be the same for pretty much every organization. So some organizations are like 5 or 6 committees. That doesn't work because it's normally the same people on it. And that just causes basically burnout. So if you're on committees and you're meeting 3 times a month on each committee, that's not sustainable at all. It's just not manageable. So you're trying to amalgamate committees if you can. So we're going to have like 10 committees or 5 committees, trying to bring, like fundraising can be separate committee, marketing can be separate committee, but it's the same thing. So keep it together. So you're reducing the amount of workload on people and the amount of meetings on people. The boards then, or your management committees, will be represented by community people that have a knowledge of what you're trying to do. And they will be very much kind of focused on the community and then what the community wants. So like you say, you take for example, most sports clubs with the people there that are passionate about the sports. They're involved in coaching, they're involved in helping out, but they don't want to get involved in fundraising, they want to get involved in grant applications and so that. They're very much kind of focused on what the group is doing. When you've got skilled and experienced people that might be maybe say business background or finance background or legal background or engineering backgrounds, and they add some serious weight into that group because they're bringing a level of expertise on board. Ideally, you have the person that's got both, that's community focused, but also has some skills that are relevant to the group as well. We would always recommend an advisory panel to kind of sit alongside the organization. They won't be part of the organization. They're pretty much there at the end of the phone call or the end of an email. So I'm on a lot of advisory, well, not formal advisory panels, more kind of informal panels where I'm asked, by people to help out, or they might email me or text me, ring me and say, Tom, can you give some advice on X, Y, or Z? And I'm happy to do it because I can probably get an answer faster than they can. So it saves them time. So your advisory panel normally if you're an accountant, your company accountant, your company solicitor. And then the key thing this is what I'll be kind of suggesting all of you look at doing is look for people in your community, your village, your parish, your town, wherever you're from, that have skills, experience, advice that's relevant to you, and they can provide that on a voluntary kind of pro bono basis. So they don't be charging for it. So if you're developing a capital projects, building projects, talk to an architect locally that might give you some advice and some information. You're not going to go off and do the planning for you. You're not going to go off and you're not asking to do their job for free because they're probably very, very busy and they just want time to do it. So you're not asking them to, spend 40 hours on the project for nothing. You just basically want them to maybe, review a tender document for some local architects, or review a set of plans that came in from the architect, or review maybe a bit of quantities, whatever. It might be a financial problem you're having and you're just trying to struggle with it. You might just bring an accountant that locally and say, look, give us an hour of your time, just kind of explain what this is about, and we might need some help. It might be legal advice, it might be social media, someone that's got a social media locally. That could be students that's looking for work experience, it could be on someone TY students in the school. Could be local web design company, local marketing business that are willing to give you some time for free, maybe the website for free for you, or give you more of a social media strategy, or do some photography for you, or whatever it might be. Use that. There's a lot of people locally who don't want to get involved in fundraising, they don't want to get involved in coaching, they don't want to get involved in painting the building, or they don't want to get involved in day-to-day stuff, but they're very happy to give their expertise, and they won't charge for that. If they do charge for it, ask them for free, because if you and this is coming from a consultant that my living comes from working with not-for-profit organizations, so of course we get paid for what we do. But if you do work for a group locally, whether you're a web designer or you're a photographer or a videographer or an accountant or whatever profession you're in, if you do something for free for the local school, for the local club, for the local community group, you get it back in spades in terms of goodwill from the community. So it's worth giving 10 hours to the local community group is worth way more than spending €1,000 on an advertising campaign, because you get nothing from the advertising campaign, you get a lot more back from the community because they appreciate it. And also get your name. So for a young startup business or someone that's looking to get a start in their career, getting involved in local communities is a brilliant way of getting their name out there. So use that, and if they're not aware of it, they should be aware of it. Tell them, that they'll get back goodwill from this if they support you. So use the skills and the skills bank that's there in your local areas. We were involved in a project called Niche there last year before Christmas, and what they've done up there in one town is that they've developed a mentor panel. So they've created a panel of mentors of people that are working in local companies, like accountants, finance people, legal people, marketing people, marketing executives, whatever, and they've created a panel, and each of those people each of those companies have donated that person's time for maybe 10 hours a month to work on local projects. So maybe it might be 10 people on the panel, and they're called in then when they need support. So it's a really good way of the companies locally supporting voluntary groups. And it's a way of them kind of ticking the kind of corporate social responsibility box. So something to look at in your own communities as well. Okay. So developing a project is the next step. So you have your structure, so you've got your team of people together. Some hopefully they're voluntarily being coerced to be involved. You've got your needs analysis done. You know what the gaps are, you know what the services need in the community, what facilities you want. And now you sit around the table like these people here in front, and you're kind of up with ideas. Okay, what do we do? How do we develop this project? What do we need? Where do we start? And this can be very daunting for groups, because sometimes it can be a lot of money involved, a lot of bureaucracy involved, a lot of planning involved, a lot of development involved, and they've never been through this before. And it's really, really daunting. Because the facility or the project or the service that they're trying to develop for the community kind of falls on their shoulders. They're the ones being charged with developing this for their community. So if you're involved in a club, like a football club, tennis club, boxing club, or whatever, and you're kind of part of the project team to develop a new facility or develop the premises, it's kind of falling back on you that if you mess it up, they're going to go and say, well, geez, we have to lads do it there now, they made a mess of it, and we're 5 years behind and nothing's happening. So it is a big responsibility, and it can be daunting for an awful lot of groups. I suppose the purpose of the workshop tonight is kind of maybe it could fight your life out of you too, by the way, but it'll kind of show you what's involved, so you're aware of it. I think it's very important that you're kind of aware of what you're getting yourself involved with rather than getting your eyes closed. And if you follow steps that I'll be talking about tonight and do kind of properly and follow the system and utilize the supports around you, it's not as bad as people might make it out to be. When people jump in to the deep end of these pools, they kind of find that, geez, no, I realize I can't swim, and they're kind of now struggling. So don't just dive into a project, think about it logically before you jump into it. So the first thing that I always say to groups, and we're asked to get involved in these big studies a lot, and I'll ask them the following questions, okay? What is needed to start the service? So what do you need to have in place to start the service or to start the project or start the facility, okay? So you've identified the need for whatever it is in your community or whatever it is in your organization, and you need to ask, okay, what do you need to start this? So if it's, let's say, for example, a club that are developing, they want to develop a new pitch on their club grounds. First question is, do you have the space to do it? You know, sometimes you don't. You're going, why did you even think of starting this, being done in the space to do it? Sometimes it might be a community facility that want to expand, and you ask, say, you know, have you room to expand? Is the capacity there to expand? Where can the service, if it's a new service within the community or a new project within the community or facility, where can it be delivered from? So can this project be delivered from somewhere else? Can it be delivered from existing premises, or do you start something brand new? So very often there's a lot of duplication in communities where, you know, there might be a service already in an area that can be expanded to develop, you know, another part of the service rather than new one starting off. It might be the exact same service already in an area that people aren't aware of it. Or there might be a service that's maybe like underutilized, or a building that's underutilized in an area that can be utilized a bit more. So the first thing we look at always is, rather than do something brand new, can it be added to an existing project, or can an existing project be tweaked slightly or expanded slightly to include the new service? And if there is no way of doing it in an existing space, then you're looking at something brand new. The key question are, what are the setup costs? And again, most people don't know, they know what's going to cost, which is kind of worrying. So it's like kind of going into the bank with a mortgage for a house, if you have no idea how much the house is going to cost. That's a very short conversation with the bank, the person in the bank, because they're going to get back to us when you have no idea what you're doing. A lot of groups we work with, they completely underestimate the cost of their project. Okay, so they expect the project to maybe cost €100,000. They go off to do a study, they get plans drawn up, get the architect involved, they get a surveyor involved, and then the project is back at $500,000. They're like going, how's it $500,000? So people just, you know, they don't realize the cost of things because they've never been involved in that process before. So my job is kind of make them aware of it and fight in the life of them and tell them how it's going to really cost, and show them other examples of projects. But the key thing is, if you don't know what's going to cost, don't start, because you're not going to, it's not going to work. If you know the setup costs, and the setup costs are just too high, it's too big a project, it's too expensive, don't start it. Don't think that as you start it and you find the money from somewhere. That's like getting a car, driving from Kerry to Dublin with about maybe 10 kilometers left in the tank. You're thinking, okay, actually, there's a petrol station on the road somewhere. This will be okay. You just wouldn't do it. It'd be crazy. So don't start a project that you possibly be able to finance long term or finance to complete it. So there's a lot of half-finished community buildings, half-finished sports facilities, half-finished housing estates all over the country because they started it, but they wanted to finish because they had all the cash. Is there funding available? So is there grants available for the project that you have in mind? And there probably is. Will it be enough? Probably not. In a lot of cases, I know I've been involved in a few projects that have been in excess of €1 million, and the maximum grant you can get is $250,000. You know, that circle doesn't fit into that square, like, you know. If your project is €1 million and the maximum grant is €250,000, that's just not going to start. There's no point even beginning the process because you just won't get there. So do you scrap the project completely, or do you scale it back to the point where it now fits what funding might be available for it? And on the other flip side of that, your project might be €10,000 of a project, and the maximum grants that are available is €2 million. So now you're going to have to do the wrong grant. You're going to have to have a grant that's huge, but you don't need a huge grant. You're going to have to need a smaller grant. So it's knowing what grants are available and knowing kind of what's enough and what's not enough for you, and can you mix and match grants to get the project over the line. What investment is required from the community? Key question, again, people don't ask that question. I ask it a lot. Because normally, not normally, always the grant that's going to be available to you won't be the full amount. You won't get 100% funding. You'll always be a percentage asking from the community. More often than not, a percentage of that percentage needs to be in cash. So if you come in with a loan, say, actually, we're fine, we got 20% of the project that we're going to finance by a loan, and you won't get funding. And the reason you won't get funding is because if you can't show a capacity to fundraise and raise your own money at local level, you're not going to get supported, because that shows that the project won't be sustainable afterwards. Okay, so they need to see that you're capable of raising money yourselves. That's why they look for maybe 5% of the matching funds has to be cash, because they want to see track record. Okay, so you need to go back to the community, say to the community, right guys, we wanted this building, we wanted this astroturf, we wanted this extension to the school, you wanted the Thai Towns group, you wanted this, that, and the other. What are you going to give us? Are you going to put your hands in your pocket and give us money to make it happen? If the community aren't going to, don't start it. Okay, the community have to be behind it. If they're not behind it, they're wasting their time. What are the projected operational costs? What will it cost to run when we start it? So if we get the money to build this thing, how much will it cost every year to run it? And can we say, honestly, we can actually raise enough money every year to keep the show on the road? Can we keep the roads open? Can we keep the lights on? Can we keep the place insured? And if you can't, don't start it. Don't buy the car unless you can pay for it easily, because then it's a waste of time. Just don't build the building if you can't get the lights on once it's built, because you won't get grant aid to run the building afterwards. You can only do that through fundraising and through fees. So if you feel that we're not going to be able to generate any money off this thing, we can't generate any money off the project, whether it be through fundraising or fees, then we won't be able to pay the running costs. So therefore we won't start it. Otherwise it'll be waste time. What are the potential revenue sources? Can we generate revenue from this project? Every project, doesn't matter what it is, you can generate revenue from it. Okay, and you can generate revenue from the project in two ways. One, you charge fees, so you rent space, for example, or you have a membership base where you can pay for membership to be part of the club or the group, or they pay for use, so when they're using the services or facilities, they pay for it in some way, or you raise money through fundraising or sponsors. Right, so you want to Thai Towns group, and you're not going to be able to charge people to look at a garden seat in a park, or to look at a flower bed and look at a biodiversity project. You're not going to charge people for that. You can't really generate fees, but you can get sponsors. So a sponsor can sponsor the seat, a sponsor can sponsor the biodiversity garden, they can sponsor the sensory garden, sponsor the playground. So you generate revenue from one or two sources. If you feel that we can't charge for this because there's nothing to charge for, and we're not very good at getting sponsors, then we question why we start in the first place. Okay, so that's the viability. Can we build it? Can we afford to build it? Can we afford to do it? And then can we afford to run it? Okay, so it's the same as your own personal lives. You know, we'd all love to go on a €10,000 holiday in July, but can we afford to? No, so then we don't do it. You don't get to the airport and say, please we head off home and see if we can manage it halfway through. You don't do that. So, same thing with buying a house. You buy a house or you build a house that you can afford. You buy a house and build a house that you can actually get a mortgage to do. You don't go off and build something you can't afford, and you can't get a mortgage that you can't repay. So in our own personal lives and business lives, we do this constantly. We look at is it viable before we start. We do the exact same thing with projects. And if it's viable, do it. If it's not viable, don't start something that's not viable, because it will be an absolute headache for you, for the community, and for the people that come behind you that are trying to keep things going. And you will have someone in 10 years' time saying, why the hell did you do this back in 2023? There was never need for it, and now we're basically paying for it forevermore. So just be careful before you start. And the cost analysis, the big thing is to understand the costs. And this is something that I suppose I'm going to spend a bit of time with you this evening on, because it's an area over the last 12 months that have basically frightened the living daylights out of organizations I'm working with. A lot of people focus very much on the construction cost of the development capital project. How much it's going to cost to build? How much it's going to cost to build? They don't think about the pre-construction costs, so the costs involved in getting it to the building stage, to get to the planning stage, and they don't think about fit-out costs. So you see in a lot of communities in Kerry and in elsewhere, if you drive around the country, if you drive a lot, you see them everywhere. A lot of buildings that are built, shell and core we call it, that they're not built out. There's no furniture, there's no flooring, there's no paint in the wall, there's no showers in the dressing rooms, because everyone focused on how much it's going to cost to build, and we forgot about the fit-out costs. Just like in a mortgage for your house, you forget about furniture, you forget about the toilet, you forget about the shower, you forget about the sink, you forget about the kitchen. And you're like in a lovely block cement, the wires hanging down the house, but it's not a house, it's just basically shell. You have to think about the other costs as well. So the pre-construction costs are the survey, if it's a building, the design, planning application, The tendering stage. So to get a project to tender, you just get an architect, an engineer, mechanical engineer, quantity surveyor, possibly structural engineer, fire cert, disability access certificate, planning fees, etc., etc., etc. All that costs money and they're expensive. The construction costs, your quantity surveyor will tell you how much it costs to build the building. Then your cost of supervision costs for supervising the construction stage of the building, which means your architect's fees, professional fees, and then your fit out costs. Okay, so it's not just about building something, it's all there is other costs around that. And it's really important that you factor those in, because if you don't factor them in and you don't apply for enough grant aid, if you're applying for grants for them, you're not going to have enough money to start or not enough money to finish. And you also be careful, because very often the pre-construction costs aren't allowed or allowable in some grant aid. Okay, so they won't be funded by yourself. And to give you an idea of the costs that are involved, in the pre-construction survey design tendering stage, getting the project to tender, and the supervision stage of the project once it's started, it's on average, in my experience, around 8% of the overall construction costs, but a quantity surveyor would probably estimate it being 10%. So if you can imagine a project that's €1 million, you should be expecting to pay close to €100,000 worth of fees, which is actually bananas, but that's the reality of it. We're involved in 2 projects at the moment. They're not €1 million, they're probably about €500,000, €600,000, and the professional fees of both of them are averaging between the both roughly about €45,000. That's before shovels put in the ground, before block is laid, before anything's done. That's just getting it to planning stage and getting it to tender stage. So it's costly, but it's a necessity. You cannot do it without it, because of building regulations. You have to go through all the hoops in terms of regulation, in terms of fire, access, building control, etc., etc., etc. And every level of bureaucracy is being landed on people. There's a cost associated with getting that bureaucracy over the line and getting those filing and reporting done. It's not right, but it's the reality. Is it something that I detest? Absolutely. Is it something that I completely disagree with? Absolutely. Is it something that's to live with? Absolutely. We have no choice around with their regulations. It has to be factored into your overall budget. If it's not, then you're going to be landed with about €40,000 that you want to expect. This is for not for capital building projects, not for every small project. But if you are looking at construction projects, just be aware of it. If you are looking at any other project outside of construction, whether it be whatever project it is, there's always going to be hidden costs that you might be aware of. So the best thing to do is talk to other groups that have been through the process before and say, okay, we're putting the costing together on our project, whatever it is, no matter what it is. Can you tell us how much cost for you to do it, and was there any unexpected cost that you weren't aware of, so that you're not aware of it? Okay. I kind of compare it to Ryanair, the flights for €30, and then you want to check in a bag or maybe 2 bags, and you want to bring kids with you on holiday, so you can at home, and all of a sudden your €30 flight is up to maybe €200, and you're going, how did that happen? Because lots of times it's hidden costs that people aren't aware of. They're only aware of it once they do it once. So just be careful of that. Then you look at a cost benefit. Now, if you're looking at large scale funding, which some of you might be down the line, okay, the government has a thing called a public spending code, which is kind of ironic, the government and a spending code, but anyway. And they have a public spending code, and they want you to check basically to see if your project is got some sort of cost benefits analysis done. In other words, is it worth putting and checking money into this project as opposed to another project somewhere else in the country? But I also have a cost benefit questions I ask my groups, and I say, okay, is your project going to add revenue to what you do? Okay, so if you're building an extension to the community centre, will it bring in additional revenue that will cover the additional costs? Will it bring in new people? Will it bring in new customers, bring in new clients? Will it be bringing in new opportunities for you to get sponsors, bringing new opportunities for you to get more fundraising done? So in other words, can this thing pay for itself? If we do something new, can it pay for itself, or we will have to subsidize it with our existing work we do? Okay. If it doesn't benefit the strategic direction of the organization and or your project, question it. What that basically means in layman terms is, if you're an organization that's providing services for older people, okay, and that's your role is to provide services for older people, whether it be daycare, Meals on Wheels, social care, whatever it is, respite care, whatever it might be, and you decide, Jesus, there's grant out there now to put a sports facility in place. It's not what you do, so why are you chasing it? So a lot of groups will go after funding and grant aid because it's there, and they'll try to create a project to meet the grant aid. That's insane. There's no point in doing that because everyone thinks, Ashford's extra money. The extra money you get is only for that project. It's not going to benefit the other stuff you do. Okay, so if you get a grant to, I'm trying to think of one grant to say do a pilot project. This is your disability organization, and you're providing service for young people with disabilities, and you get a grant to do let's say a course on let's say occupational therapy, right? And that grant is only for a specific period of time. And it's okay, great, there's a grant there, so now we'll have occupational therapy for our clients, for our service users. And then that grant is used, the money's gone, the money's spent, and now it's okay, now we're service users, now the kids and the families are used to getting occupational therapy, but we don't have any money now because the grant that we got to do it is gone, and we can't deliver it anymore. So you brought base expectations up, now you're just dropping those expectations because you don't have the money to sustain it. So I would question why do it at the start, why do it at all if you can't sustain it, okay? So unless it's really tying in with your overall direction of where your organization is going, then why are you doing it? Don't go chasing grants for the sake of going after grants, okay? That's like a person sending in their CV for every single job and hope to get a job. Sure, doesn't make sense. So if it's not really needed, question it. You haven't done the needs analysis locally, right? So if you're having a committee meeting and you decide to go for 2 points after the committee meeting, and you're on your 5th point, you decide, geez, I have a great idea. I think we'll do this. And after you run with it, but you don't have anything to back it up in terms of it's needed or no one's told you they want it, then I'd question it. Okay, so I always ask groups, have you done the needs analysis? And can you back it up? Can you tell me that people actually want this in your community and there's enough people that want it? Because if they don't want it, you're wasting their time. If there's additional one-off funding, okay, so one-off funding sounds fantastic because it's money, but it might lead to additional administration costs, right? Or it might add to your operational costs. So if you add an extension, it's going to add to your insurance, it's going to add to your running costs, it's going to add to your light and heat, it's going to add to your cleaning, it's going to add to everything. So if it's not needed, don't do it. So you might get funding to build it, but you might get additional funding to cover the additional costs. So if it's once off and there's no long-term funding there, only take it on if it's not going to add a burden to your existing structure, your existing admin, or your existing funding. I remember years ago, we worked for a local development company up in Dublin, and our senior management team was very, very, very good at bringing in additional grants to projects like training grants and things like that. And our administrator used to be going off the head because every time a new grant came in, that was a layer of administration they had to do. And they were never consulted. So the next thing they went like from dealing with, say, 4 sources of funding to maybe 10 overnight. And that created mayhem because they didn't have the resources to deal with it. So they brought in loads of extra money, but they forgot about the extra hassle of bringing in with it. Can the costs that are involved, can it be covered through in-kind support? So can you get, instead of maybe buying equipment or buying furniture, can you get that for free from somewhere? Okay. Can you get some of the advice you're getting in terms of consultancy for free instead of getting it instead of paying for it? Can you get maybe, I don't know, things like, say, maybe the painting done for free? Can you get the paint supplied for the building for free? Can you get the flowers for the flower beds or the hedging for the planting scheme done for free? Can you get maybe, a local, I don't know, carpentry business to maybe make some furniture for the sensory area? All those sort of things. Rather than pay for it, and can you get, that through in-kind support rather than having to pay for it to cut down your overall costs? So there has to be benefit. Okay, if there's no benefit there, it doesn't have to be an economic benefit. Like, you're not talking about, like, you're not there you're not businesses investing in your projects to make more money. You're there to be a benefit to the community. So there's no economic benefit. It's not the end of the world. Okay, because you're not there to back up the economy in most cases. There might be a few social benefits. That's why you're doing it. So the occupational therapy for young people with disabilities I mentioned earlier on in the example, that's going to have a huge benefit for them as individuals, but also going to benefit indirectly for their families or their carers or their parents or whoever might have been after them. If you provide a play area for kids in your community, there's no economic benefit whatsoever for that. It's going to cost money. It's going to cost money every year, but the social benefit for kids is immense. If you're providing rural transport, which a lot of companies around the country are doing, there's no economic benefit there really because it's costing more than it's going to generate in terms of revenue. but the social benefit of someone being able to get out of their house and socialize and meet with people on a week-to-week basis is immeasurable. You know, so it's not all about economic benefit. There has to be some benefit there. If no one's benefiting from this, then why would you even start? Okay, so once you decided that yes, we'll run the project, we have our team, we have our costings done, we got over the initial shock of the costings, and we're still sticking with this, and we're still going to drive on with it. And you make a decision then to, okay, right, we want to do this, we've all costed out, where can we get the money from? Okay. So bar rating the piggy bank, as in this picture here, you need to start looking at realistically where you get the money from or where the money is. Okay, and that's where you start doing, you know, the more detailed analysis in terms of what funds are available. So the key thing with any project is that there is going to be a requirement for some level of funding. Okay, that could be through grants, which primarily most people are looking at is where can we get the grants to do this? Is there grants to do it? Is there core grants available? Excuse me, is there core grants available afterwards to keep, you know, keeping going, can get funding on an ongoing basis for operational costs? You got fundraising, your traditional fundraising, like your backpacking, your fashion shows, basically, that kind of stuff. And you've got your online fundraising, which is basically the way that I'll be talking about next week in terms of really what you should be focusing on in terms of maximizing your spread in terms of the market you go after to get money through fundraising. So not just your local area or your local community or your village or your parish or your town. We're looking at people that are from that area that are living all over the world, but can also now get involved. Sponsors, companies, partners that want to get involved more than just give you 100 euros here, 100 euros there. They want to get involved maybe long term as a partner to the project. Donors, philanthropic organizations who give donations to community projects. You've got loans, like Tancredo, and Sarah Leahy from Tancredo will be talking, I think, on the event on the 30th. Again, Sarah's local from Cause of here in North Kerry, so she understands rural projects and she understands local projects, and she's in the county, so it's always a help when you get someone in the county in decision-making mode. Community Finance Ireland is a lady in West Limerick, who is over the area here. Again, both Tancredo and Community Finance Ireland support community projects either through long-term loans, commercial mortgages, and they provide bridging loans for projects that need bridging finance for capital grants. You've got commercial loans, which are available to community volunteer organizations. Most don't go after commercial loans because the directors of those companies have to sign directors' guarantees. And I would be strongly advising, even though I'm not a financial advisor, I would be strongly advising to look alternatively rather than look at commercial loans, because you're not going to sign a director's guarantee for a community volunteer organization. You might have to sign a director's guarantee if you've got a private company because you need to invest in your own company, but you're certainly not going to do it for a project that might be relying on fundraising long term to be after loan. In-kind contributions, as I said, are your advice, labour, materials, equipment. So what I want to focus on this evening is we're going to focus on the rest of these next week is going to be the grants and the types of grants that are available for projects. Currently, that will be available next year and potentially the year after, maybe beyond that, but certainly will be available next year for you. Yeah. Just before I go on to grants, is there, I should stop the share for a second so I can see people. Is there any questions so far on any of the kind of the initial stage of developing a project? What's involved in developing a project? No. Is there anyone at that stage at the moment in their own projects, in their own communities or their own organizations where they're kind of at the stage that they've identified the need and they're looking to start something and they're terrified and not too sure should they start this? Is anyone kind of at that point? Is there any question or are you all of it? No? Okay. And you're fighting the life out of you, you're all very shy, one or the other. Okay, any questions? I'll move on if you don't have any questions. Fine, perfect. Okay. And go to the screen. Okay, so a big part of what I do in my day-to-day role in my business is assisting organizations with grant applications. And I suppose I started doing grant applications back in the late 90s when I was working in the local development sector, and part of my role was to sorry, not the late 90s, early 2000s, and part of my role. So when I worked with Partnership Tralee back in 2005, my role there was a community enterprise officer was my title, and my job was to basically bring in funding into town to support what at that time was called social economy projects. And my role was to help potential projects in Tralee to get social economy grants to develop their projects. So like Cumann Joseph, Kerry Respite Care, Kerry Fire Road Transport, our First Community Centre, all kind of groups like that. I was working with to get them grants. So my job was to assist them with putting applications together. And then after when I was on my own in consultancy, I did a lot of work on grant applications. And to be honest, over the years, I've experienced the gradual rise in the amount of grants that are available to organizations, which is fantastic, but also the complexity in relation to getting them and applying for them. Some of it got easier. So we do a lot of sports capital application grants. They actually, funny enough, have got a lot easier than what they were when I started first. When I started first, you put together like a little binder of information, reports, and studies, and support and everything else. Now it's an online application with very minimal space for any sort of explanation or any sort of description of your project. It's more technical in terms of supporting documentation, okay, which within this one problem in terms of some groups don't have had that documentation on hand. But look, as part of your role as volunteers in the community volunteer sector, doesn't matter if you're working for an organization providing support in your community, or you're a sports club, or you're a Titans group, or resident association, or school, or whatever. The reality of your life as a volunteer is if you're going to come across a grant application at some stage or another, okay, whether it be directly or indirectly, you're going to be dealing with grant data. You might be lucky enough that you've dodged the bullet of being on the fundraising committee, and you only hear about grants that someone else in the organization is doing. But you need to look at in terms of the grants that are out there, what ones you should go for. So some of the grants that we're currently dealing with projects or groups I'm working with or dealing with or applied for. So the first one there is Leader. So Leader was out of action pretty much, for want of a better word, for a while, because the previous Leader program was finished a couple of years ago. So they were in a kind of transition kind of a phase where they were kind of we're working off kind of maybe funding, but they weren't able to go out and develop really much new projects because they didn't have a program at that stage. The new Leader program, which is for the next 5 years, is currently in kind of contractual stage where the companies that administer the Leader program, so in the Northeast West Kerry, you have Northeast West Kerry Development, NEWKD, would administer the Leader program on this side of the county, and then in South Kerry, you've got South Kerry Development Partnership, who manage the Leader program down there. Both of those organizations are currently in a kind of a contractual stage in terms of getting approvals to be the lead organization on the Leader program going forward. So it's unlikely, but definitely not unlikely. It's not going to happen this side of Christmas. So you're looking at probably early 2024, but it's only 2 months away, where that program would be in place, and they'll be opening up their funds for applications. So they'll be accepting new applications from new groups. So under the previous program, there was up to 75% available for capital grants and 90% available for feasibility studies for projects. We're presuming that the criteria will be something similar to what it was before. What we are hearing is that the criteria going forward under most of the teams next year, or the next program, will be very much focused on the environment. So there will be a lot of emphasis on how your projects that you're developing are kind of like linked to the climate action plan, and how your projects are kind of environmentally friendly. So if that's a building project, what are you doing in terms of the building, in terms of energy efficiency, etc. The type of kind of projects, let's say in a community that will be looking for Leader funding, will be capital projects like building projects, renovation projects, community gardens, fit out of facilities, etc. You have the Community Enhancement Program, which is through KCC, Kerry Council. So Kerry Council would manage a lot of the kind of the larger capital funding, and then they've got their own funding programs within the council that they provide support for community development organizations. So that things like the community housing program would cover things like renovation costs, small scale refurbishment projects. Community Foundation of Ireland have a range of funding programs, so they manage a lot of different funding programs, and they come up time and time again for different types of projects. The Orca Recreation Infrastructure Scheme, again, is managed by County Council. That would be things like developing walkways, repair of walking trails in communities and villages in towns, improved access to leisure facilities, recreation facilities, things like outdoor gyms, recreational parks, that sort of thing. It's a part of the program for government to get people active and to promote recreation in rural areas. So, for example, you might have a situation where you might be living in a village where there's limited areas to walk, especially in winter time. You want people walking on main roads in the dark. It's dangerous. It's not safe at all. So they might put in a walking trail that is floodlit or something, things like that. Things like community gardens, sensory gardens, play areas would come under that. The big one then would be the Rural Regeneration Development Fund, or the RRDF, and that's your project fund. That's your funding for large scale projects. So your projects are in excess of €1 million. So like projects that the councils would do, like public groundworks in villages or towns, streetscape, urban design, planting, that sort of thing. Basically, taking derelict buildings, vacant properties, and redeveloping them as multi-purpose space. So the ones we've been involved with would have been the last one we did was a community enterprise centre above in Durrow and County Laois, where they were renovating existing old Presbyterian church, and they purchased a car park that was next to the church, and they were building an extension onto the church on the car park, which was going to be a multi-purpose community enterprise and art centre. Another one we're currently working on in Port Carlington is they're converting an old cinema, the old Savoy Cinema, which was actually in the film Into the West, which was 8 years ago. You might remember it. That movie, or that film, that cinema that was in that movie, is now being converted. They want to convert it into a multi-purpose arts and STEM building for young people that want to get involved in technology, arts, creative design, that kind of stuff. And they're putting plans together to get funding for that. So again, your multi-$1 million projects, which is a lot of them in Kerry being trying to be developed, a lot of things trying to get old vacant properties developed, or new projects or new facilities being built. Town Village Renewal Scheme again is under the County Council, again to fund things like, say, regeneration projects, dereliction, vacant properties, converting them, renovating them, kind of parks and green spaces, developing remote working facilities and communities, things like that. So then there's a couple of projects there locally. Last year in Kerry got funded up maybe €200,000 for renovation projects. So that sort of money's out there. And it's just a matter of being kind of shovel ready with a project and a project team, and kind of have a good proposal ready to go to get that sort of level of funding. But it is out there. Community Centre Investment Fund, which was a new fund that came available last year. There was two funds. The first one was for building renovations, and the second call towards the end of the year was for new builds with an excess of €1 million expenditure. So bigger projects that were new buildings on greenfield or brownfield sites to build new facilities in communities. They were very much focused on multi-purpose facilities, so that they'd be used by everyone in the community. So if you could imagine a hall in a village being used in the morning for, say, yoga and Pilates, in the afternoon for active retired, from 3:30 onwards for after schools, and from 6:30 onwards for indoor soccer or drama or dance classes or whatever, or just for meetings or for after funerals so people can get together, or for birthday parties. So multi-purpose, multifunctional, multi-activity community facilities. That's what the government's focusing on. The days of the government putting money into a project that's doing one thing and one thing only is gone. There's no value in that. It has to be. There's no point having a community hall that's empty from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 5 p.m.
Monday to Friday. And it's busy in the evening time and busy the weekends, but it's empty the rest of the week. That's not value for money, that's a waste of time. You need to be sure how you can utilize the building throughout the day, every day, 7 days a week, because that's going to bring real value to the community. Community Centre Investment Fund is going to be there again next year. The government had included in their program or in their budget for next year, so that's going to be coming up. You got social finance, as I said earlier, that will be focusing on your matching funds for the grants. So let's say your grant is 90 or 75%, 5% might be by fundraising, and then the remaining 20% of your budget is going to come from the loan. That would be long-term loan up to 15 years and a short-term bridging loan. Because the way grants work, which you might be familiar with if you've got grants before, is you spend the money first, and then you go into your funder with your receipts, your invoices, your reports from your engineers, and the work has been done. Your bank statement show the money's been spent. Probably a letter from your accountant saying the money was spent the way it was supposed to be spent, and a bit more blood, sweat, and tears that they look for. And then you can draw down the grant and you pay off your bridging loan. And then your balance of your loan then is your term loan over 15 years. And that from Catholic organizations, as I said, again, like Ireland's Fund, Chicken Manus Foundation, Tomar Trust, they would all get involved in various different types of non-profit projects. SEAI, so SEAI have a range of grants to Sustainable Energy of Ireland or Authority of Ireland. They have a range of grants around improving the energy efficiency of your building. So a lot of community buildings now are getting energy audits done, where they're identifying how the buildings can be more energy efficient. They were being done years ago, over the last number of years, but the last 12 months they've been done pretty much everywhere because of the utility bills going so high. We've all seen it in our households, but could you imagine heating a building that might have been built back in the 1950s with no energy or no insulation in the ground, no insulation in the roof, no insulation in the walls, and there's got basically heat blowing out and literally blowing out the walls and blowing out the ceiling and blowing out the ground, and they're paying an absolute fortune for it. So they're non-sustainable. So now they're doing energy audits to see where they can upgrade the energy efficiencies and see where they get funding to do that. Rethink Ireland, that was formerly the Social Investment Fund. So again, they would get a lot of grants to manage for government. So again, they would be very much focused on things like education, economic empowerment, health, very specific kind of funding for like disadvantaged youth, people with disabilities, older people. They wouldn't be for generic stuff like buildings and for community projects like or parks or sports facilities. They'd be very specifically focused on specific types of projects, but they are there. Getting Foundation, like I mentioned already, a range of funding. Revenue, God bless them. they have tax relief and donations, so you can apply to revenue as an approved body for tax refund donations. So basically what that means is that if you get a donation from a PAYE worker, so someone is working and is paying PAYE tax, you basically go to them and say, okay, can you give me 250 euros either up front or 250 euros over the course of a year? Which basically means it'll be I will not per month like direct debit. If they give you 250 euros over the course of 12 months, you get them to fill in the form, so they put their PPS details in that. It's like a receipt, and they fill in the PPS details on the form. Then you as a group will send that form off the revenue, and you can claim the tax they would have paid that 250 euros. So if they're on tax rate of 40%, you get 40% of 250 euros back. If they're on tax rate 20%, you get 20% of 250 euros back. So you get a top up revenue of what they're donating. Really good scheme. A lot of clubs do it, a lot of churches do it as well. And the best way to do it is you set up a direct debit scheme with your donors. So maybe get 100 people in the community, give you 25 euros a month each. That's €2,500 a month. Put into your bank account. At the end of the year, you submit all your revenue forms to revenue, and you get back between 30% and 40% on top of that. Okay, so it's a really good way of bringing in revenue every year. And it sounds like a lot of money. 250 euros is a lot of money, but 25 euros a month is more manageable. So there are people in the community who can afford 25 euros a month, guaranteed. So, if you can find 100 people, as an example, or 50 people, or 1,000 people, whatever way you want to go, and if you're approved as a body for refund donations,
you can generate a decent amount of revenue from it. We'll be talking next week about a fundraising strategy. It is really important for every organization. Doesn't matter if you're a tiny organization with a budget of €1,000 a year or a very big organization with a budget of €1 million a year, you have to have a fundraising strategy. A fundraising strategy for a non-profit organization is the same as a business plan for a for-profit organization. If you don't have a plan how you're going to bring in money from your customers, you're not going to survive as a business. If you don't have a plan in terms of how you're going to fundraise locally, you're not going to be sustainable. Okay, it is madness to go around and do multiple fundraisers every year just to keep things going. So, like, we better do a backpack because we need money for the insurance. We better do a flag day because we need money for the lights. We better do a fashion show at the end of the year because we can't afford to fix the hole in the roof next year. That's not sustainable. That's burnout. That's people going off their heads, running a mile from it because they're sick to death of doing multiple fundraisers. Plus, it drives the community mad because every 5 minutes someone knocking on the door, someone tips or something. It's just that day is gone. There's easier ways of doing it. And I'll talk to you about that next week in terms of sustainability. Sponsorship, again, completely underutilized. There's lots of people out there making lots of money in their companies. Lots of people out there in very senior positions in companies. All these companies have responsibility to do something back to the community. Most of them want to, but they have no idea how to. Okay, so you go to them with a project that ticks a box for them, and say, look, we can help you with your social responsibility by getting involved in our project. Your employees are benefiting from the work we do, etc., etc., etc. There's marketing value. You can go through all these things with them, and you make it easier for them to say yes to your project. Okay. People say, "Oh, sure, we keep asking companies for money, and they never give us anything." It's how you ask for it. It's what do we get in return for it. We had a group up country years ago who were developing a community childcare facility, and they went to a local employer, and they said to the local employer, "Do you realise that we're providing childcare for your employees? Do you realise that your employees can go to work every morning because we provide childcare? Do you realise that when their child gets sick, we look after their child? They don't have to leave work to come in to look after the kid because we look after the kid for them. So we're going to do is basically to support us to keep us doing that." That's brilliant. That's ingenious. That's like just simply saying, look, if we're not here, you're not going to have staff. So of course they funded. They supported us. The main sponsor was the local employer who was employing the parents of the kids in the creche. It makes perfect sense. So again, we go with a reason for them to get involved. And that's really important because if you're building something, now there's opportunity to say, okay, how can we be part of it? Can we give them not naming rights because you want the Coca-Cola community centers and that with the stuff going on. Give them naming rights to maybe be part of it. So like this kitchen was sponsored by whoever. This Century Garden was sponsored by whoever. This library was sponsored by whoever. Give them that sort of rights to it. So time into like longer term deals, maybe 3-year partnership deals, stuff like that. That's all possible and all can happen. So you're not always looking for grants because you're just looking for grants only, and grants are your only way of getting something done. That's not sustainable. Okay. Plus, if you have no other way of getting money in, and you're completely reliant on the grant, you're not going to get that grant because you're not proving to the person who's going to give you the grant that you're capable of managing this without a grant. Okay. So if you go into the bank looking for a mortgage, and you're saying, okay, I need 100% mortgage because I don't have any money, they're not going to give it to you. But they used back in the day, back in 2004, you get one. But not anymore because I want to say, okay, have you got, a deposit? Have you got some sort of way of generating revenue, generating money yourself, repay the loan? All these questions are asked. The funders out there today, whether it be Leader, whether it be Kerry Fund Accounts, whether it be government departments, whoever it might be, will ask the question, can you bring something to the table? Because you can't. If you're looking for us to basically subsidize the entire thing, that shows that you don't have the capacity to raise money, which shows you want the capacity to raise money in 3 years' time when the grants are gone. And you're looking at 5,000 square foot building that needs to be insured. Okay, so that's why you need to show them now that you've got capacity to do it. Okay.
Tom, sorry, there's just a question there from Joanne Murphy.
Yeah.
The microphone isn't working, but if you do a project and pay VAT on the materials, if you're not registered VAT, can you claim back the VAT from the revenue?
No, this is a big issue, and it's something the government should address, but they're not going to listen to me about addressing it. But if you're not registered for VAT, and I don't think there's any community volunteer organization that I know of anywhere that is registered for VAT, if you're not registered for VAT, you can't claim that back. The revenue do have a VAT reclaim scheme, which is very, very small compared to the amount of VAT they take in from community projects. And again, if you have an accountant locally, they'll assist you with that return. But basically, it's kind of like a fund that revenue have that they give some money back to groups as kind of a token gesture to give them something back, but it's nowhere near what they paid, what they pay out on that. So if you're not registered for that, you can't claim that back. So if you spend, let's say you've got a project that's costing you €1 million, okay, which is a lot, obviously. On that €1 million, there will be but you're talking about 13.5% of the money you're spending is in VAT that's going back to revenue, right? So let's say you've got a project €100,000, and 10,000 of that is 10,000 euros, 100,000 euros construction cost. 13.5% of that €100,000 is VAT. Okay, that's going to revenue. If you get say 10,000 euros of professional fees from architects and engineers, 23% of that is VAT that's going back to revenue. Okay, and you can't claim that back. So when the government gives you a grant, and it's what it kind of annoys me, because the government says fantastic, we give money for construction projects, which they do. But 13.5% is going straight back into their coffers again, into revenue. So, and you have no way of claiming that back. So revenue have come up with a scheme where they will refund some, but they won't refund it like a VAT return. It's only like a pot of money that you can apply for to get something back, but it's not based on what you've paid out, if that makes sense. Okay. Some groups do register for that. So let's say you do register, let's say you're a community organization and you register for VAT. And let's say you're renting space to the active retired group, or renting space to a remote worker, or renting space to the youth club, or wherever it might be, right? You know how to charge VAT on the rent that you're charging. Okay. So in most cases, community organizations do not register for VAT because one, the services they're providing are actually VAT exempt, so they can't register for VAT. But to answer, that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but to answer your question, no, we can't, we can't, but there is a scheme there that you can get some money from revenue of their VAT fund. How much that is, I don't know. The application process for that, I don't know, because I don't do it. But there is that option there. Okay, but it is very annoying for organizations when they're see on their invoices to the builders and to their architects and to the engineers and to everyone else that there's the VAT that they're paying out is not refundable. Okay, I don't know if the government will actually do anything about it because it's money coming back into them. And also just on that, I know it's coming aside, but something as well when you're actually putting your applications together and you're justifying, not that you have to justify, but you're justifying the money that you're looking for. One of the key things, if you're, let's say for example, we've done a project above in that project above in Leash. It's a community project. It's going to be community arts facility, right? But there will be tourism and there will be tourists coming in, spending money. It will bring tourists into the town we're talking about. And we can show them that for every tourist who comes into the town, they'll spend money in shops, restaurants, cafes, and the customer will stay over, okay? And we've calculated what that would mean to the local economy. But it's also going to create jobs. The community project that we're talking about is going to create 5 jobs. Those jobs are paying tax. So there's going to be payroll tax coming back into the checker based on those jobs. So over 10 years, you can show that how much money is going to go back to the government in terms of VAT, payroll taxes, and then the indirect spend in the local area in terms of the local economy. So if you say to the government, if you give us €100,000, we actually over 10 years, show you we can actually bring €1 million back to the local economy, which benefits you. That's where you can show the value for money. So we very often will show that on the application or in the value for money analysis that the VAT element of the project would actually be going back to revenue, which go back to the government checker again. So if you're on a €1 million project, that's an awful lot of money. On a €5 million project, it's a massive amount of money going back into government straight away. So again, you can use all those things in that data to kind of make a point, to make a case for your project. So go back to the grant days. There is specific grants that are available. So like pilot grants, pilot projects, one-off funding. There's a couple of pro there. I think they're going to be in as well on the 30th of November to talk about the grants they have. So like it's various different there's various different schemes and programs and funds that are out there that people can avail of, whether it be on a one-off basis or kind of an ongoing basis every year. Annual grants would be grants that would be for core funding. Okay, so they would be like projects that would be funded under Section 38 or Section 39 under the HSE. So that would be core funding for staffing costs, operational costs. You've got community voluntary supports like community enhancement program, community support fund. There will be annual grants that come up every year through the local authority for Kerry County Council that groups can apply for. And you've got maybe other projects in like the community services program, which will be funding, core funding for community services projects, which will be social enterprise type projects. So again, they wouldn't be very common, but they are out there. And so the key thing when you're looking for grant aid for a new project, I'm talking about new projects specifically this evening. When you're looking for grants for new projects, make sure that you research the grants that are available for your type of project. There's no point in looking at grants that are not relevant to it. People do. I get phone calls all the time to Tom, there's a grant out there, should we go for it? And I look it up and I go, okay, why are you looking at this? Nothing to do with your organization at all. I don't know how you found it, but it's nothing to do with you. You're not eligible. And sometimes just look at the eligibility, who's eligible, who's not eligible. It will save you time. And it'll save a lot of phone calls to me as well when people ring me and ask me when this right country. Know the deadline. So there's nothing more frustrating to find out that a grant was available for your project, ticked all the boxes, and the deadline was last Friday, and you missed the deadline. Okay. Beware of the deadlines when they're coming up. Because if you miss a deadline, you miss a deadline. There's no going back on that. You're not going to get, no one's going to forgive the fact you missed the deadline and allow you in afterwards. Once the deadline is gone, it's gone. Research the aims of the grant. Okay, look at previous groups that were awarded. Is there a precedent set that a project like yours somewhere else in the country was funded previously? If it was, then they want to fund your type of project and you're meeting the criteria. You need to do a bit more research in terms of making sure that the aims of the grant match the aims of your project. Have you the consultation needs analysis done? So we talked about last week. Have you the project identified? And again, that kind of sounds like common sense. You know, we have a project identified, so therefore looking for a grant. A lot of groups identify the grant, and then they try to find the project that's going to meet it afterwards. That's like, you know, kind of buying the cart and then having no horse. They're going to pull the horse, you know, or pull the cart. You know, get your horse first and then get the cart afterwards. It's key thing really is like in terms of, as I said, there's a lot of groups out there that will just develop projects to meet a grant, and it kills the organization. It kills it because they're now doing something they're not supposed to be doing. They're now trying to manage the project with no idea how to manage it. They now have another layer of burden that they weren't aware of, they didn't realize it was going to be that much of a problem. And they now got another drain of resources that they don't really need. It's insane. So don't develop something unless you need to identify for it. Okay. The other thing they say, build this and they will come. Yes, they might come, but if they don't, you're really, really in trouble. You're better off building it knowing they're on the way, waiting at the door, kind of lined up, you know, kind of begging to get in. That's where you develop the project. Okay, not kind of, I hope that this is going to work out okay because I hope there's like a need for it out there. Why would you develop a project when there's no need for it? Have all the necessary documentation applied. This is really important because a lot of grant applications are, not a lot, every grant application is very technical. They will look for supporting documentation, your annual accounts, your annual report, your bank statements, your details of your company number if you got a company, your tax access number for tax clearance certification, your annual statements, your project feasibility study that's required, your drawings, your planning details, your planning reference numbers, all these documents and all this detail, your lease agreements, your deeds of copy, your insurance details, your policies and procedures, all these things they'll be looking for. Okay. Everything that is mentioned there should be on file somewhere. Okay. If they're not, you're not going to gather those in time to put your application off in time. So the amount of people that miss a deadline because they can't find their company memorandum of Articles of Association, or they can't find their the deeds of the property, or they can't find their annual accounts or their statements, or they don't have them, or they don't have their bank statements on digital online statements, so they're waiting for the bank to send them out and miss the deadline. Probably, I would say 30% of the ones we've seen failed because of documentation. That's that's soul destroying because you're waiting for maybe another 12 months to get the application in again. So to miss out maybe, 10,000 euros, 100,000 euros because a piece of paper wasn't available on the day, is head wrecking. Again, you complete the application form, which is obvious, and you provide any supporting documentation required. Okay, so that's your steps in any grant application. Some grants are online. Actually, most of them going online, which is good and a bad thing. It's a good thing from the point of view that normally the online applications are more straightforward than paper-based ones. It's a good thing in terms of that multiple people can work on the application, so you can give people access to the application so they can work on parts of it. It's a bad thing in terms of some people just are not very good at kind of online technology. It's very bad because some places have very bad broadband, which means that you can't really access the online form, or crashes, or it takes too long to refresh, and it kind of goes back to the start again, or the day of your deadline, you're ready to send off the application, and your broadband's gone down. Okay, so kind of very, very negative impacts as well. But most applications now will be in some form online, will be through a portal, or will it be through an email address you send the application to. There's another question over there. Okay, so in terms of the grant application, so what we would recommend everyone to do is this, and it's what we do for projects we work on an ongoing basis, is to simply, does that fancy pen and paper and a ruler, and just, a diary, whatever you want to do it, or if you want to put a database together, if you want to put an Excel spreadsheet together, doesn't matter what way you do it. This is simply a box, a table that I did in Word, or sorry, on PowerPoint. The name of the grant, okay, so what grant is available, the source of the grant, so let's say it's Communities Support Fund. That'll be through Kerry County Council. The contact person, normally when they announce the grants and they put it up on the website, there's usually at least a contact email. It might be contact name, but it'll definitely contact email or contact number, and more often than not, a contact person as well. For what project would that grant be relevant? So write down on your form, on your table here, what project would that grant would be most suited to? Okay, so some groups will have multiple projects. The deadline for the project. Now, normally what I would do there as well is put down the application deadline, but I'll also put down your deadlines. So what deadlines you want everything in place to get the grant ready. So if I'm doing a sports capital application, some groups, I'll give them, the deadline might be, let's say, the 30th of November, right, as an example. I'll give them a deadline of the 20th of November to return back to me. So I'll create my own hard deadline, because I don't want them to come back to me on like literally 9 a.m. on the 30th of November, and I'm panicking then. So I'll revert them back to me well a bit in advance of it. So I tell the groups themselves, if there's a group I'm working with, make sure if you put in deadlines for applications, but you will have the deadline on your planning sheet here. We also put in a deadline in terms of what you've done and when you've done for. So if it takes 4 weeks for the solicitor to come back to you with a legal document, which you probably will do, get to them first. If it's going to take you 2 weeks to get a bank statement from the bank, get to them first. It's going to take you, 1 minute or 10 minutes to get a kind of reference number, then you don't have to worry about getting exactly done last. What's required? So what information do you require? So what we need to do to get this grant over the line, what information we need to have in place, and then who's going to do it. Okay, so what's the action? So that might be a committee meeting where I say, okay, Tom, you're going to go and get the stuff off the solicitor. That's my responsibility. I'm going to have that done by Monday. Mary, you're going to have the stuff got from the bank. I'll have it done by Tuesday. We meet next Friday, and by next Friday, I'll say, yeah, I got the stuff from the solicitor, and yeah, Mary's got the stuff from the bank. That's the level of kind of action planning you need to do when it comes to grant applications. If you do that well, you will get grants easier. If you don't do that, you miss deadlines. If you don't do that, you're going to have very poor applications. If you don't do that, the chance of not getting a grant are a lot higher than getting a grant. The organizations that literally draw down lots of grants every year are very organized when it comes to getting the paperwork in place. Very few of them, if any, that I come across, use consultants or pay people to do it. They do it themselves. Okay, they have a very good team. Maybe 3 people that are charged with all of them getting information put together for the application, and they work very, very carefully together in terms of making sure that things get us in place. And they have a well advanced deadline. They proofread it about 100 times. They double check it about 100 times, and they get everything off. Everything's perfect. Everything's clean. and they're normally usually probably 100% success rate in getting the grants. Okay, so the source of information, then if you're wanting to find out how do I start filling this document, to get information on grants, I use two sources. So Funding Point is a paid for membership site part of the feed. I can't remember what the fee is. I think it's probably €120 a year. I'm not too sure. It's not massive anyway. Okay, and that's basically a database of all the grants that are available, and it's updated on a regular basis. So as a grant becomes available, they update the site, and as we've got links to the website or the department site or the criteria or the application form, whatever it might be. Active Link is another site I use, which is basically, again, go into Active Link, you can see the funding opportunities on the tab, and you go into that and see what funds or what grants are available. And what I tend to do there is I basically just keep an eye on what grants might be relevant to the groups I work with. But if you're working on a specific project, or you're working on a number of projects within your community, just keep an eye on it. You're not going to go in there every day, because it's not going to update every day. I would say probably maybe for like 10 minutes once a week, which is a lot to keep an eye on it. So maybe you might say, okay, put in my diary, get a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock. While I'm having a cup of coffee, I'm going to just jump onto Funding Point, see if there's anything new there that's relevant to me. If there is, I'll tell the community. If not, I won't tell them go. Okay, and that's just, you're building into your diary. Just get used to doing it, so then you won't miss anything. You'll be updated the whole time. Again, there's a funding calendar under our rural future in terms of grants that are available under that policy document. You can also get in contact with PPN. I'll see they have a newsletter and the website. They will update regularly in terms of what kind of grants and supports will be available for the sector. And you also just go on to the various different departments. So some groups are linked to one department. So if you're a sports, your department is the sports department. If you're in communities, it can be community rural and whatever it is. That'd be great for them. So you go to your press office and say, okay, can I get on your contact list? Can I get on your mailing list? Every time a grant is announced, they have to publicly announce it. So it's usually issued as a press release on the website. But if you're on their press release contact list, they'll send you a copy of the press release, so you know then when it's been announced. Or you just keep an eye on their website, and you go into the press releases and you see, Minister Humphreys announces today €3 million in funding for whatever it might be. Okay, and that's what you just keep an eye on. So it's not like people, oh, it's enough for work involved in that. It's not. Literally, you have a cup of coffee, keep on, not even 10 minutes, 2 minutes is all it takes. Most people are on Facebook or on Instagram or TikTok, whatever, for an hour looking at rubbish. Spend 2 minutes looking at this, and you get access to all the funds that are available. Okay, so it's not hard work at all. And just assign someone to do it. You don't need to have a committee doing some one person doing it. Okay, that's the Active Link site. So if you see here, you go to the site, it says funding, click on funding, and it comes up with the funding that's available, the title, the region it's available in, the dates, the list, category. And you go into this basically further information on criteria and all that will be there. This is the Funding Point. So if you go into the Funding Point, you register on Funding Point, you go into the database again, similar to that, of the various different grants that are available. Okay, and all the information, the criteria, the objectives, the application form, more information, further information, links to the website. Maybe it's the department's website. Normally they would have a PowerPoint on how to do the application. Sometimes they have webinars on how to do the application. So look, in fairness, any grants that are made available now, there's an awful lot of information and support on how to do the grant application. And the reason is that they do that is they want to stop them of the rubbish applications coming in. So if you're a civil servant working in the government, okay, or in some department, the last thing you want is 10,000 applications coming in from all over the country, and 9,500 of them are absolutely rubbish, and you're trying to read them and trying to make sense of them. Right? That's a nightmare, right? That's not. There's no job satisfaction in that. So what they do is they do webinars, they do PowerPoints, they do videos, they do loads of information, how to put in the grant application, how to register for the grant, what to put in, what to say. They literally do it for you. They literally give you paint by numbers guide to do the application form, because they want to make sure that everyone is putting a good application in. So it saves them the time of having to go through absolute kind of mind-boggling rubbish and applications. And I say that because I was the person in my previous life assessing applications, and I could write a book about the stuff that people send in. The amount of people that will put in on a section of an application form, please refer to section 1A, because it can be bottomed up backside into and out that section, or they put in non-applicable when the course is where course is applicable. And they won't even, they'll probably fill maybe half the application because one, they that's too late. Two, they have no idea what they're applying for. Three, they couldn't just be bothered. Or four, they were basically coerced by someone on the committee or someone on the board to do the application for them. And it's just a waste of time. So, look, it's free money. They're not going to ask for it back unless there's something wrong. So spend a bit of time on it, and you'll be rewarded. And the thing is, this is the key thing. This is basically the trade secret, okay? If you do well once, every application form is similar. So 90% of every application you look at is going to be the exact same information you look at. 90% of it, okay, with the exact same information, the exact same layout, the exact same format, pretty much the exact same wording on the questions. So if you've got a really good application done that's been successful, you cut and paste it. Okay. So like if you're going for a job and you've got one CV, you don't rewrite your CV for every job. You tweak your CV to suit job, but 90% of your CV is the same because you can't change your education. You can't change, your work experience. You just basically tweak it to suit the job, but you keep 90% of it. So if it's a very good CV, you don't have to rewrite it every time. If it's a very good application, and it's got all the relevant information in there, you do that as one kind of standard template and then use that for all your applications going forward. Okay. If you do a really bad application and use that as a template, every application is going to be bad there. Okay, so do one really good one, and then the rest. I won't say it becomes easy, but it becomes easier. And trust me, it does. If you do more and more of these, it becomes a lot easier. Any questions before I go on? No? Okay. That's great. Okay, so what to investigate when you're looking at grant aid, especially for larger scale capital projects, which we're talking about specifically here. So the eligibility criteria. So what criteria you have to comply with? Okay, and if you can't comply with certain criteria, then you're not eligible. Simple as that. You can't pretend to be. You can't ignore it and just do it anyway. That's a waste of time. Types of projects are going to be funded. The aims of the grants. So it's really important that you look at what their aims are. So, and they will tell you what the aims are. So they'll be linked to some policy. So remember last week I talked about how your projects are kind of linked to strategic policy nationally or locally. If they do, you can state that in your application form. You can say that the aims of our project meet the aims of this grant, and you can actually reword them if you want to, and say meets and put in inverted commas meets the aims of the grant as outlined in the criteria, and also meets the aims of national policy. Okay, so tell them, they should know, but tell them anyway that look, what we're doing here, guys, is actually something we want to do. So we're doing it for you. Terms and conditions. So again, looking at the terms and conditions that are in place for the application, and are you compliant with them? The application process, sorry. So some online applications, for example, you have to register first, and normally the registration deadline is actually before the application deadline. So for example, sports capital grants are done on what's called the Oscar portal through the department, and you have to register on Oscar normally about 2-3 weeks before the deadline for the application. Some people don't know that, they don't realize it. They go into the application form, they register, and they miss the registration deadline. So just be careful that if it's online, that there's no separate deadline for the registration process. There will be a registration process, obviously, but sometimes it's a kind of ongoing process. Look at the amounts that we apply for. They will typically state the maximum grants that are available and the minimum grants that are available for the project. If it's not stated, and it'd be very unusual if it wasn't stated, contact them and say, look, can you tell us what the average grant normally would be for this, or what's the maximum grant can be applied for, what the minimum grant can be applied for? If you need 250,000 euros and the maximum grant is 10,000 euros, waste time, don't even apply for it, what's the point? If your price is 10,000 euros and the minimum grant is €1 million, why are you applying for it? So again, be aware of it. Timelines, again, deadlines, very important. Matching fund requirements, as I said, they will vary. So they'll state very clearly what the percentage is that they'll fund. So it can be 75%, 80%, 90%, whatever it might be. They'll also state very clearly how much matching funds is in cash. So if they say 5% of the funds have to be in cash, in other words, money in your bank account, then you have to have 5% in the account. Okay. They normally look for a copy of the bank statement to prove matching funds are in place. Or if it's a loan that you're getting, that the loan approval is in place. Not a letter from the bank saying, geez, they're great people. If you ever look for a loan, I'm no problem getting a loan. That day is long gone. You would have to have a loan approved in principle from the bank signed by the bank and normally stamped by the bank also. If it's funding in your account, the bank statements would have to be probably at the very latest 3 months old. They won't accept anything beyond that. Okay, because you can get a bank statement from last year to show 20 grand in your bank statement, but there might be nothing in it now. So it has to be up to date at least within 3 months bank statements. And what we tend to do is put in, if there is money in the account, we can state that we have matching funds in the account, and that funding was fundraised locally by the community. If even if it wasn't, just someone gave you a loan but put in there, and still it was funded by the community because you to show that you're capable of losing money. Look at what supporting documentation is required. I said earlier, and start gathering that most of that documentation should have anyway. If you have it in place now, that documentation doesn't change. Like the Members Act Association won't change, your constitution won't change, your policies won't change greatly. They might be added to, but they won't change dramatically. Your offshore bank statements will change. Obviously, your accounts for the year will change. Your annual report will change. Your lease on your building or your deeds won't change. So all those things are standard. Have them on file electronically, so save them on a drive, like say Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox somewhere, not on a laptop, not on a USB stick, because Jane, who's got the laptop with the details on it, is on holidays and bought a laptop with her, and she got back on after the deadline. That's no good to you. But Jane's not going to stop drinking her cocktail over in Spain just to do grant applications. She's got the laptop. Okay, so make sure you've got access to the files. And not everyone's got access to them, but the committee's got access to them. So save them on a cloud server somewhere, so that you can access them relatively easily. Okay. One people I know that have lost the USB drive with all their details on it is madness. Not madness, but it's just we're going to waste an awful time and miss deadlines because of it. Documentation that's going to be required will be strategic plan. Sometimes, if it's going to be a large grant, absolutely they'll look for a business plan or a strategic plan or a feasibility study, especially for the large capital grants. You would have to show that to justify it. And they would things like they would show you needs analysis, the rationale, the objectives, the context, how you're going to operate the project, the viability of it, and the impact analysis. So they would be for your $500,000+ projects. Proof of ownership will be needed. It's a lease. Again, sometimes there will be a minimum lease required on the grant, so that might be 25-year lease or might be something else. The annual report, again, in terms of your track record, again, everyone should have an annual report. If you don't, but the question is why you don't. Again, your annual report is standard. We would recommend use a template, like a PowerPoint template. Use the same template every year and just add to us and change things around, like say what you achieved this year. So it does not be a big ordeal to take on an annual report. Your annual accounts, if you're unincorporated group operated with a constitution, your treasury report basically is your annual accounts. And if you're a company, your accountant will have a copy of your annual accounts. Again, they will send you a copy of those normally electronically by PDF. So save those. Your constitution or Members Act Association. Your quotations, so often obviously the grants, your client grants, you have to show either 3 quotations or it might be a pre-tender quotation to do, but you have to show they normally state the minimum amount of quotations they'll accept. Planning application details, if it's applicable, like a planning reference number might be okay, or they might look for the actual copy of your planning application or your planning approval. Technical documents, drawings, the quantities, any surveys. Proof of consultation normally would go into your plan. Tax clearance, so your tax reference number, which would be your tax number. If your company, your tax reference number, and your tax access number, which gives them access to your tax clearance. Policy and procedures, if you have all your policies and procedures in place, if they don't ask for them, normally what I recommend is on your plan, you would say we have the following policies in place, and list them, but don't actually include them, just list them. And in some cases they will ask for them, but rarely would they ask for at the application stage. You might look for them afterwards, but rarely at the application stage. Insurance, they look for normally maybe stating if you are properly insured, or they might look for a copy of insurance or details of insurance in terms of your liability limits and your excess on your policy and also when your policy look for renewal. Things like public liability insurance or employer's liability insurance or things like that. Okay, so once you've identified your funding source, okay, so now we're at a stage where you've done your needs analysis, you put together your team, you research the costs, you've identified what the costs are going to be, you research what grants are available, and now we're presuming you got the grant and you're ready to rock and roll, okay? So you're now at the stage where you're pretty much kind of putting the planning elements of spinning the grant together. And this is the part that is the part I worry about for most groups, because this is where it gets kind of, it gets real now, kind of sort of thing, because how long was good, would be great to the grant. The next thing you got the grant, you're thinking, okay, we've got the grant, and there's a lot that we need to do now to get this grant over the line in terms of spending it. So this is really important, and this is, I suppose, very simple kind of steps that we would recommend every group to follow based on our experience of groups that do it and have done it right, and based on our experience of groups who haven't done it right. And this is based on my own learning over the years as well, in terms of dealing with, I suppose, grant drawdowns. I don't normally deal with grant drawdowns, but some projects we get involved with, we do get involved in on the drawdown stage of it. So this is kind of what we recommend, okay? Form a project management team. And that team needs to kind of realize that they're going to be responsible for dealing with key people involved, which will be your design team, your architects, the builders, and the funders, and the banks. Okay, so it's like if you're building a house, a self-build, you're kind of project manager, okay, but you don't have any project management skills, and that can be very daunting for people, okay? They're also putting their trust in the design team that they're going to do everything with the best interests of the community and of the community group in everything you do, which you would hope they would, but that's not guaranteed. On the project management team, if it's a building project, try, if you possibly can, identify someone in your community, someone you know that has building experience or is coming from engineering or architecture or quantity surveying or some sort of construction background, okay? That kind of knows their way around plans, planning, building, okay? So if you don't mind about building and you're taking on a project like this, I'm not saying that you're going to be calm. I'm not saying that you're going to be, you won't know what's going on, but it's an awful sharp learning curve, okay? You need to have someone there that knows their way around this, because especially for larger projects, I'm talking like some projects we're involved with, like they're massive projects, that they're 10,000 square foot buildings, but they're multi-million euro projects, and you've got volunteers are thinking, okay, we have no idea what we're doing here, and we're paying a fortune to some architects and engineers and we're just hoping that they're doing everything on our behalf properly. So get someone from somewhere, your friend, relation, husband, wife, son, daughter, neighbor, golf partner, gym partner, the cornerback for the senior team. It doesn't matter who it is. Ask them, can you please come on board? Not to get involved in those meetings, but just to advise us and keep an eye on this for a short period of time. And once it's done, we'll be ever grateful, and we don't get involved anymore with us, okay? So you've got your project management team. Okay, that's basically you as a community group or your team of people. You get a tender then together to get a design team. So the design team is going to be your architect, engineer, quantity surveyor, all the key people are involved in putting the planning application together or the tender pack together. So that design team then go off and do the final design. You go for planning and they put a tender pack for contractors together. Then you go through the procurement stage, which is basically you're now going out to tender for the project, where you're basically sending out the tender documents so contractors can price the job. And that would be managed by the design team. Okay, so they will put together a tender pack. They will assess the tenders come back from builders, and they will deal with any questions back and forth from the builders in relation to the project and in relation to the design, etc. Okay. Then the design team will consult the project management team on awarding the contract. So who's going to get the contract? Who's going to get the contract? What construction company are they recommending to get engaged to do the works? Then that contractor comes on board. The design team and the project team meet with the construction company and they agree a cash flow and schedule. So basically a schedule of payments, and then they work out a cash flow in terms of how they're going to fund the schedule over the course of 5 or 12 months, whatever it might be. Then the construction starts. Construction is done, the fit out starts, and then the launch. Okay. At this stage here, from the award of contract to the launch, the project management team has got to manage the drawdown of the loans to pay for the phases of the build. Then manage the drawdown of the grants for the phases of the grants that are going to be paid out, and manage the cash flow in terms of making sure there's enough money in the account to meet the next stage payment, make sure the grant comes back in time to meet the next drawdown and next stage payment, and manage that cash flow over 12 months. Okay. So the next key person to get involved in your management team is someone with finance experience. Okay. And your company accountant or an accountant, because they need to be working close with you in terms of the management of the cash flow. It's a lot of work involved in this. It needs to be done right. If you get the right people on the team, it makes things a lot easier because they're used to it. They're dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. This sort of stuff isn't going to faze them. They're not going to be worried about it because they understand that they do it for a living. Okay. You're just hoping they'll do it for you on a kind of voluntary kind of, keep an eye on this for us type thing and make sure we're doing it right, without charging for it. Okay. The design team, you have to pay, but the person that's kind of overseeing that element of it to make sure that, you're aware of what's going on, can be a board member, a committee member, or project team member that's doing it kind of pro bono. Okay. So your project management team then becomes the following. So your promoting group, which is yourselves. So you're the partner, you're the operator of the project. You will liaise with the design team, and you will liaise with the project funders. So let's say there's 4 of you that have been roped into being the team. And you're there and you're thinking, right, what do we do now? What's our job? Our job is to work with, as the project lead, to work with the design team and to work with the project funders and make sure everything's going to track, everything's running to schedule, etc., etc., etc. What I would recommend strongly when you're engaged with your design team, pick a design team, so an architect, engineer, whoever it might be. Ask them, have they worked on community projects before, and have they worked with community groups before, and have they dealt with public funding before? Okay, so architects that work maybe on kind of sports facility projects or schools or things like that, they will understand the whole kind of grant drawdown system. They'll understand how communities work. If you've got a design team who only deal with like corporate buildings and office blocks and hotels, no offense to people in the community sector, but they won't be able to handle it. They won't get it. They won't understand it. They'll be too frustrated dealing with it. We need someone that knows how communities work, know that they're dealing with volunteers who don't probably know what they're doing, and that will work closely with you. It's very important that you pick a design team that has experience of working on community projects and understand grants and grant drawdown. Otherwise, it'll be too much of a learning curve for them as well. Okay, there's lots of practice software that will do that. Project manager is basically the person that you assign to manage the project. Okay, that could be more than likely will be the architect or whoever the design team lead is. So an architect or engineer. There's no point in one of you becoming the project manager because you're not project managers. They are. That's what you're paying them to, is to manage the project. So the design team will have typically an architect. They'll draw up the drawings, etc. Construction drawings, plan application, construction engineer. If it's like a new build or maybe an extension or a survey an existing building, mechanical and electrical engineer to draw up the kind of the lighting scheme, the electrical scheme, the plumbing scheme. It's a public building, because it will be. The fire cert and disability access cert has to be done by a specialist consultant, and then the quantity surveyor will do the costings on the works that come back from these 4 up here. So they'll cost the entire build based on the construction drawings and the specifications in terms of lighting, mechanics, etc. Okay, all of these cost money, and there's not a lot of them. So there's a very mechanical engineers are rare, fire and back cert consultants are rare. Not a whole pile of them, so they are expensive. They do very, very good work, but they are expensive. So unless you know someone that's going to do it kind of on a cheaper rate because they know you, and you can, they're paid to you, and well done. But if you can't, you will have to pay it. They will do the preparation of construction drawings, the quantities, the tender process. They would also be the project supervisor. So this is building regulations stuff here. Project supervisor construction stage is a requirement for building regulations and building control. And they will also then be the project lead. So they will liaise between the contractor and yourselves, making sure that works are done on time, etc., and done to a certain standard. Okay. So you won't be responsible for managing the construction because you're not qualified to. Okay. they will. That's what they're being paid for. So that's why they charge a lot. But they're the ones to make sure that if the building falls down in 5 years' time, you're not to blame there today. If the building goes up in fire in 2 years' time, you're not to blame there today. And that's where you're paying for their liability basically. Project finance, the project management team up here, yourselves are going to liaise with the funders. So the council, the government departments, Clan Credo, whoever it is that's financing the project, you're going to be dealing with them, making sure that you're dealing with them on time. You'll also be dealing with the design team, the contractors, and you'll be dealing with the payments to them. Okay, so you'll be dealing with the payments to the contractor, do the budgets and all that kind of stuff, right? We would always say to get the company accountant, if you have a company accountant, get them involved in that as well to make sure that you're completing the paperwork properly. Again, they do this for a living, so why are we trying to figure out how to do it when they can do it for you? Again, it's going to cost you money, but it means that you get your returns in faster. The faster your returns go in, the faster you draw down the grants, the faster you get the payments in, the better you manage your cash flow. Okay, so there's an awful lot of work involved in it. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. There is an awful lot of work involved in it. There's an awful lot of work involved for volunteers, and there's an awful lot of work. Sorry, not work. There's an awful lot of pressure on volunteers to get this right, because basically anything that goes wrong, it'll fall back on you at a community level. Okay, I'm not trying to scaremonger. I'm trying to say is that if you've got systems in place and you've got the right people involved, it makes things an awful lot easier. You can take that pressure off you. Okay, do not try to be the hero and try to get everything on yourself, because you won't be able to. If you have to be honest in a group, so as a team of people, if you look at each other in the eye and say, okay, right, none of us have construction experience, none of us know anything about finance, none of us know anything about building. I kind of question why you're all there, but you say, okay, we need to find someone somewhere that we know to come on board and help us with this, and we get them in quickly. Okay, you might necessarily have to pay them, but ask them to get on board. If you're retired, if you're married to someone on the committee, whatever it is, just drag them in and say, okay, can you outline where we can be pitfalls here, what we know about, so we can pretend we know what we're talking about when we talk to the design team, and we know what we're talking about when we're talking to the contractor. It's very important. The successful groups I've worked with, and I'm talking about the multi-million euro projects that they've got off the ground. We were at the start, we got them the grant, and we were gone then, we weren't involved after that. And we go back maybe 5 years later and we talk and say, how was it? They're probably, their hair is raised considerably, they've aged considerably, they're being stressed out, but they got it done. And the ones that have done it successfully said, we got help to get it done. We got people in locally that know what they're doing, and they advise us, and we got the right design team in, the right architects, the right engineers, and they were a dream to deal with. We paid them a lot of money, but they made our lives not very easy. Okay, I'm talking about the largest capital projects here now, the largest scale projects, like, you know, $250,000+ type projects. This is the level of work that's involved in it. Okay, so I'm not here to say, oh, there's loads of money out for next year. There will be. Honestly, things are very easy and it's great and all that. It's not as hard. It's hard work, but if you follow a system and keep on top of the system to process and get in help and get support locally from people, not paid help, pro bono, voluntary support, volunteers that know something about something, and get them involved in your team. Okay, this is a project team that are tasked to do a piece of work. Once the building is up and running and you launch it, you can say, our work here is done, I'm out here, good luck, thanks very much, gone. Okay, because then your job, it's a team specifically put in place to get this thing over the line. And I know some people on just knowing me personally from previous work we've done or current work we're doing tonight, you're familiar with this, you're probably all thinking, yeah, Tom's talking right here, we're all terrified. I'm not trying to scare you, but this is, if you just follow the system, trust me, it will be an awful lot easier. If you think it's easy and go in blind, it will be an absolute mess. We're knowing there's a bit of work involved, but you've got a system to follow, it makes things, I trust me, an awful lot easier. I'm a great believer of action plans, because with action plans, actions happen, things get done. Without them, nothing gets done. So you base your list, your tasks that you have to do, which I mentioned already, your team, design, procurement, award contract, construction cash flow schedule, construction phase, fit out launch, who's responsible, what date, needs to be done by, what's the budget, where's the source of funding. Okay. The most important thing here is that there's someone responsible. So if I'm on a project team, I'm on a project team at the moment for another project. My job is to get grants. My job is to unfortunately was to get design team together. Okay, I know my role, and I would know we're getting deadlines to do it. Okay, if my job is when you get to the point here of the design team tenders, that's responsible to the design team, the architect. So the architect say Joe Blogs. Joe's responsible to get the planning done. Sorry, planning done, and his date assigned to Joe to get the planning in by a certain date because you have to meet a deadline for a grant, whatever, right? Joe's going to give you a fee to do that, and you got to figure out, do we pay that out of our own funds, or can we get a grant to do it, or do we fundraise to do it? Same with documents. All this stuff is always, so the construction phase is the responsibility of the builder. They will give you a construction schedule, and they say, okay, we would have this building finished, ready to open by end of September. What's going to cost? Where's money going to come from? So everything's working to a schedule in terms of, we know what we need to do, we know who's going to be responsible for it, we're going to give them a deadline to get it done, we know what's going to cost, and we know how we're going to fund it. Okay. Without this, your meetings on an 8 o'clock on a November evening in a cold community hall is going to be over a cup of coffee, is going to be based in church thinking, what do we do next? Where are we at with this? Where are we at with that? And nothing gets done. It will all go over schedule, it will all go over budget, it will all be a mess in terms of cash flow because there's nothing planned, nothing written down, no deadline set, no responsibility set, and nothing, because a volunteer isn't really responsible. So I wasn't paid for this, I don't have time to do it, I have other things to do in my life, blah, 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 right? All this stuff keeps me back the whole time with volunteer. I do, I'm a volunteer, and I always come up with exclusively if I want to do something the whole time. But if you're putting your name down, you've got to be responsible, you've got to get done. Dates are hugely important because everything's going to be based on funding. So if you've got a deadline for an application of €1 million by next March, and you have the planning permission got to apply for that application or for that grant, and your design team is slow in getting planning through, and your planning application isn't approved by the deadline for the grant, you miss out on €1 million funding forever. So in 40 years' time, if only we were a week earlier with the planning application, we could have got the project. That's what happens the whole time. Is people don't set deadlines, and they miss deadlines then for funding, miss deadlines for getting things off the ground. They miss launch dates too late because they don't have everything in place. All these things happen. It happens in private business the whole time because people aren't organized or they don't have the plan in place. It happens in thinking modular projects the whole time because no one sits down and works out the plan. This isn't a business plan. This isn't detailed. You don't need a consultant to say, okay, what do we need to do? Who's going to be responsible? Name them. Don't say the team because there's no one responsible. Name the person responsible. Date, deadline, budgets required, where we get money from. Okay, really important. Without this, don't start it. Trust me, because it will be an absolute nightmare to manage. And that's coming from someone who is brought in when the nightmare is kind of in mid-nightmare, and you go back and ask them what they did wrong, and the problem is they did nothing right. And it's a mess. And it's very hard to unravel that mess because you literally, what we normally end up recommending is that they shut the whole thing down and they start again. And normally it doesn't start again, it's gone, it's lost, opportunity gone because just things weren't done properly. Look, the bottom line here is, and it's going like I said last week and tonight and next week, it's not rocket science, but it becomes rocket science because people overcomplicate. Keep it simple. Systems, step by step by step, what do we need to do next, what do we need to do next, what do we need to do next, who's going to do it, and keep that system. And it's the same system then for everything you do from then on. Every single project you do from now on, you follow the same simple systems, you get stuff done. Every community I work with has got a lot of projects going that's very successful in getting projects off the ground. Start with a small project, a very easily achieved project. They put systems in place to get that project online. They follow the same system every single time. As they learned from this and learned from the project got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So one group worked as a tight towns group, started from a small project and getting a town, getting a village tidy, clean. Next project was renovation an old building for a community facility. Next project was a larger building. Next project was a social housing scheme. Next project was a wee-bed storage system scheme. Next project now was going to be multi-purpose 7-acre recreational park and wellness center. Okay, using the exact same system for every single one of them. Okay, things work if they're done right and you follow a certain system. If you go in thinking, let's do it and we put a crack and off we go, and sure it'll all work out fine, and at the end of the day, they never work. And you might do one project and it'll be such a pain that you'll never do another project ever again. Okay. That's basically this evening's workshop in relation to taking your project from idea stage, identifying what project you want to develop, identifying a grant for that project, and then managing that kind of getting the grant and developing the project stage. Next week is we're going to pretend that you're still around after tonight, and basically you're still around after getting your project funded and up and running, and you decide, okay, right, now we got a project, now we got a building, now we got our playground, now we got our football pitch, now we got our astroturf pitch, now we got a new gym, and it's fantastic, and we got the grants, and God, we survived the whole construction process. Now we got to look at for the next 40 years how to keep this up. Okay, and that's what we'll talk about next week. How you put together structures that will operate the facility, the service, the project, whatever it is, and sustain it long term. Okay, in a way that's not going to kill people, that's not going to lead to burnout, and in a way that there's always going to be new people coming on board that will continue to sustain it long term, so that you're not an 85-year-old, and forgive me if there's an 85-year-old treasurer on tonight and on the call, and it might be, but that you're not an 85-year-old treasurer who was there for the last 40 years and no one wants to be a treasurer. Okay, I meet people constantly all over the country, where the person who was there, I'm here for the last 30 years, and I 40 or 30 years ago, I said I'd do it for 12 months, and now 30 years I'm still out because it was never a plan for someone to come in and do it for them. Okay, so big part of the talk next week is the ongoing finance, the ongoing structure in terms of how to be governed properly and manage your organization properly, and then finally how you sustain it through funding, but also have a succession plan that there's new bodies coming on board constantly every year. So you want to have fresh ideas, always people coming on board, always young people coming on board, that this thing can keep going for as long as the building is standing, or as long as the project, or as long as the community is there, as long as people need it. And that's what we'll talk about next week. So I'll stop the share, and I take any questions you want. If you're not already on the whiskey at the stage after listening to the last all of this. Any questions? No? Just, I suppose, one question I have for you. Do you, somebody might have been through a process like this before, where you've been through a kind of a project and developed it from say start to finish, and I've kind of been through and the stars to prove it. But can you see where, if you don't have a system in place, or some sort of like steps, not just steps to follow them, that it can become very quickly a mess? Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
I was involved in a project, two different festivals way back at 2013 and 2015, and we took on too much. We tried to do too much, so everybody was burned out by the time the second one was over, and we just couldn't get it together to do it again. And it was a shame because it was a great project.
Yeah. And that happens a lot, Laura. A lot of groups they try to sprint before they fall. You know, you got to crawl first, then walk, then jog, then sprint. But if you go straight into the sprint, you want to fall. Basically, it's not going to work long term. And a lot of groups they take on. I've seen it, you know, in Kerry, Limerick, Cork, Laois, Tipperary, where you've got communities that have no track record in developing projects, take on like a multi-million-euro project, and you're just looking thinking like, are you insane? Like this is, it's like someone doing a driver theory test and then tomorrow morning go and buy a Ferrari. You're thinking it ain't going to work. You're not going to drive this like at all. You're going to crash it, and the problems they crash it because they just can't handle it. So the group I think I mentioned there before we finished up was the group to start off with a very small project locally. They start off with a very small project, and they learned as they were going along. But the things they brought the community with them. So every time they achieve something, the community went, they're getting stuff done. They're achieving things. Okay? If you've got a big project and you don't achieve it, the community turn on you, because communities are very good in turning on people and say, sure, I knew it wouldn't work. They're off their head, that was never going to work. And then the community don't back you, and then the community don't trust you then anymore going forward with other projects. So you start small, and sometimes the project you pick is better projects are already happening. So this is another trick, by the way, another kind of maybe a trade secret. If you're developing projects at community level and you're trying to get the community to back you, okay, you're trying to get the community support, the community to trust your group, okay, pick the projects that don't happen anyway. Pick the project that's already in the pipeline, okay, and run with that and get behind it and say, oh, well, we were part of that, so that was achieved, so aren't we great, we got this thing off the ground. So we would put things in our plans and community plans or village plans. We put in actions that are going to happen anyway. They're already scheduled to happen. Might be like footpath improvements in consequence, or they want to put in new lighting. We put that as a recommendation. It happens then. And then the community said, well, fair play to them, that action was actually worked on. They actually got it. They actually did what they said they were going to do. And now you start building the trust of the community. If you got a very big project and it falls apart, yeah, you say no, you're going to get burnt out, and you'll be so wounded from that, the torture, that you just wanted the will or the motivation or the courage to do it again. You know, and that's key. So it's a good point. And anyone else? Any other questions or suggestions or comments?
So if your project, sorry, go ahead.
No, work away, Nora, work away.
So if your project is a big project, so what are you going to do?
If you've got a big project, and it has to be, if it's your first project, it has to be a big project. Okay. There's two things I suggest you do is you build a good team around you that are not going to be phased by it. Okay. And second, you find a group somewhere, whether in Kerry or elsewhere, that have developed a management project like it, and you go to them and say, okay, lay it out on the table here. What was involved in this, and what are the issues, and what are the obstacles we're going to come up against, or what we're going to come up against. Okay. So if I'm going to build in a house myself for the first time ever, I'm going to talk to people who've been through the process. Okay. So I'm going to find out what are the pitfalls here, what are the obstacles. So a lot of projects we work on, they are very big projects, and the group, aren't really capable of developing it. We would put them in place or put them in contact with people who can actually help them in the system. Okay, really important. So you bring in the expertise or you bring in the knowledge locally to help you, but make sure the people that are on the table are willing to stick with it, aren't going to be totally phased by it. You know.
Yeah. You can put people in project with in contact.
Yeah, it depends where it is. If it's a local project, and I know people like, so if it's like, for example, we were asked to get involved in we were doing training like this above in Limerick in Herbertstown, and they're developing an old cooperative into a community facility, and they want to build a community cafe put in a community cafe into the building, and they were like, how are we going to start this? We're very worried about it. How would it work? And I know of a project down in Kilmeedy in West Limerick that had called Roots. It's a community cafe that's been developed. It's very successful. It's working really, really well. And it's community run and community led. So I told him, go down to Roots Cafe in Kilmeedy, talk to them about how they did it, and they will go through the process, what they were involved in, the grant aid, licensing, food safety, all this kind of stuff, right? And they did. And they mentored them for free because they've been through it before. So this is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is the contact we have, this is an engineer we have, or whatever it might be, So if I know people I can put contact people with, I can. If I don't, I just say Google it. Find another group out there. Talk to the local authority, talk to the local development company. They like the people like say in NWKD or South Kerry Partnership, they know of projects. They know of other local development companies that are familiar with projects, and it's a small network around the country, So normally I would get in contact with say a local development company in Kerry or Limerick or Laois or wherever I'm working with, and I'll say, look, do you know of any project that's similar to this? Because I've a group down here in West Kerry or East Kerry or wherever.
Okay.
Similar from the contact,
Yeah, I see. Yeah, it's a museum we're trying to get together.
Yeah, there's lots of examples out there, of very successful ones, and lots of examples of disastrous ones. Talk to the ones that are disaster and find out where they went wrong, as well as the ones that worked. Very good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There's no question there, I think, Sarah.
No, I was just saying that it was very helpful what you said there from a point of view of a group that's just starting out, for us to start small, and it's nice to have the templates that you had during the presentation as well. It gives a very good foundation and direction.
What I might do as well, and Breda, I can with the slideshow, I can add some of those very spreadsheets. Like they're not, I don't go over the top in software or kind of fancy kind of templates for spreadsheets. Really, keep it simple. So I can send on those as a link as well, or not link, but as a file.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Any other questions or are you good to go? Okay, so I hope to see you all next week on the third session. And then
Yeah.
just don't forget as well, as Billy said down about the 30th, that being in person, and we can get speakers too, so it'd be good. That's good to kind of yacht soon too, and we keep them face to face.
And we'll send out Tom's all his slides and training program as well tonight through email in the coming days.
Great stuff. Very good.
All right, thanks a million, Tom.
Thanks
Thank you.
everyone. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.